President, Mayor Pro Tem Mack, Councilmember Swenson, Councilmember Cargill, noted that Councilmember Moses and Moore are not present at this time.
Thank you.
You lead us for the pledges.
States of America. States. One nation under Texas, one state under God, one nation.
Thank you so much. Few announcements. There's only one agenda item here, and that's just the water workshop. That's going to be a presentation and a conversation. So everybody's welcome to participate in that. Tim, our municipal attorney, had asked for an executive session just for some housekeeping on other stuff, but he said it's not necessary tonight, so we're not doing that. So we're just here to chat with y'all. There is, also, we've been working very hard on water for the last over a year, and haven't been able to talk about a lot because of various legal issues from mediation and NDAs and such. So we're going to talk. We're finding a point where we talk a lot more tonight. Tim's going to sort of be our bumpers on that. Make sure we don't go beyond that. But made a lot of progress, and so we decided to share that. Discuss that. There's a blood drive coming up on the 26th. Announcement on the City of Blanco Facebook page. Otherwise, let's move on to public comments. Oh, Candy asked that we move out of the.
Yeah, we didn't do public comments.
Okay, very good. Very good. So, water workshop.
Question and answer.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's going to be interactive.
Did anybody sign up?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
And there's an attendance sheet if everyone wants to sign up if they attended.
All right. So,
Pass it around.
Okay.
Do you want to start then?
Mr. Tucker.
Want me to? Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me say a few words about him as well. I didn't know him before starting this job, and like everything and everybody, I was skeptical at first. Tim is a remarkably gifted attorney, especially in this area. He's got many years. He's highly accomplished and highly respected, and we're blessed to have him representing us in this water issue. So, with that, let me hand it over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity that you present. I adopted a new rule for tonight, 100-word rule. We're going to strive that the lawyer only speaks 100 words of strike counting.
You've already passed that. It's because you get $10 a word after that.
Yeah, I violated it already. Just kidding. Want to do a lot of y'all, and I want to credit Damon Berryman, who's not here, with Vermont, or the Armstrong, who chairs PMAC, of course, Warren Estedy, all of you for driving this idea and transparent exchange. As you well know, I think hundreds of executive sessions on this issue and other related water and other issues. So it's kind of refreshing and fun to talk about some of this stuff. Anyway, to start off, wanted to just sort of set the table for the status of our water rights and some related facts. And I'm just going to put this stuff out there, and as y'all want to comment, or Mary, you want to recognize anyone else that has comments, then
Sure.
feel free.
Raise your hand.
Baseline, what are our rights? What rights does the city own? And there's a total of 1,200 acre feet that we own right now. And one of those rights derives from surface water in the river. That's an adjudicated right that's been around for many years. It's a perpetual duration. By the way, you'll note that just for translation purposes, 600 acre feet per year is equivalent to 536 gallons per day. On average, in recent history, data tells me the city is using about 330 GPD.
About 60% of that.
Correct. So to get some perspective of what we're using of that allocation. The other water right we own, and by the way, that Michael River water right is adjudicated by a district court. It's in place. We also have some separate adjudications of some impoundment rights where we're allowed to collect an amount of water behind these dams so we can pull water out as the water treatment plant is operating. When it's back in operation, we'll talk about that in a minute. The other water right we have is under a contract with Guadalupe Blanco River Authority, pulling water out of the Canyon Lake and their system. It's 680 600 acre feet a year as well. That's my contract. And that contract currently expires in 2050. We fully expect that it will renew. Don't see any reason why it won't. So that sets the table on 1,200 acre feet of water a year that's available to us, depending upon other things. And those other things are on the next slide, which we have our water rights, and then we have treatment and distribution of our water. And that happens in two primary ways. One is our own city-owned water treatment facility that accesses the river water, 600 acre feet. And then, of course, we have our internal distribution system. Yes, perfect. We're going to get into that in a minute. As you all know, our treatment plant is not online. It's under repair, and y'all can talk about that. We'll talk about it later. When it's operating, we're pulling water out of that river, treating it, and pumping that water through our internal distribution system here. And then separately, we have an agreement with Texas Water, formerly known as Canyon Lake Water Supply Company, who treats the water out of Canyon Lake, pumps it up to us at a delivery point south of town, and then we put it in the same system. We put the river water when that's operating. By the way, this presentation and this workshop is not primarily focused on wastewater, which is equally important, but a whole nother area of issues and concerns that we hope maybe we'll cover that.
I have a question. Can the two water sources be used at the same time? Can we distribute both of them at the same time?
Not to my understanding, no. They have to be treated separately. I mean, theoretically, if we went through the permitting process, mix them, we could achieve that, but right now we don't have that done. We don't mix them.
Is the infrastructure set up for it?
My understanding is going to be blended, but if they have to be something like you can't blend it. So there's the possibility to do that, it's not right now.
It's a good point, though. So when we switch, assuming the plan is online, when we switch from one source to the other, we have to flush it out. Go ahead and get it. Okay, yeah, looking at it, look.
Yeah, so it's discretionary at that point, depending upon what the elevation is in the elevated tank. Because that's what maintains pressure in the city is the elevated tank. And so we probably let that come down and then bring the other one on and let it go back up.
So they do mix it then.
Yeah, there's just an issue with mixing the two because the two processes are different.
Yeah.
And so you just want to make sure that you don't coagulate or precipitate anything out.
Not being able to take both the sand and elevated.
Right.
Flush them. Put it that way.
I think it's a pretty strict transition process back and forth, unless you get it approved and mix it all up. So it could be done. It could be done. Okay, so that's water treatment and distribution. Here's a quick thumbnail on what our status of each of these systems is. As I mentioned earlier, the water treatment plant is under repair. There is a claim pending right now against the design engineer who designed the plant. We have a specialized attorney helping the city on that matter, a gentleman by the name of Jeff Chapman, who handles water treatment design issues statewide and knows what he's doing in this area. We are at this point in negotiations and discussions with that design engineer, and we'll see how that transpires.
So, yeah, to back up a little bit, that was the end of 2019, they took that offline,
Correct.
supposedly temporarily, which was the worst time in the history of modern man to do an industrial project right before COVID hit. So all the supply chain stuff hit us. It was built and completed and ready to turn on when our engineer said, this isn't designed right. There's an issue with the elevations and this is not going to work. And so it's like running through mud. You have to go through everything we do. You have to go through utility commission, blah, 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 to get approval for changes. So we've gotten to that point. We have the design for the completion, the fix of it. And it's a big price tag. And so we're having to hammer on the engineer that made the mistake to begin with, but it's a big boondoggle. We're wading through it.
Yeah, and the projection's about $450,000 to fix it, as the slides mentions. And hopefully, I think there's some discussion about doing a certificate of obligation for that purpose, which is, in my opinion, fully justified. That's, you need to get your main water treatment plant back online, in my opinion, to be clear.
It's a portion of that not to exceed price of the previous, of the 2024 series. So it's part of that, but we're already doing another certificate.
Yeah,
correct.
But it's I think by all accords, in my opinion, it classifies certainly as one of the emergency causes of that. So we don't start that 400-day clock until we have funds and all the engineering.
That's the CO that you just approved.
No.
It's the one that you're
We're anticipating, and that's why, and again, I look at that as like a credit line. Certainly $450,000 of that is pretty critical.
that's an estimate. Yeah.
My understanding is this number was really the impetus for discussions about that CO. Now, there's been discussions of other things to go with that, but this is the linchpin to that, because you can't get your river water in going until this is working.
400 days once we start the repairs, and we want to start that 400-day clock as soon as possible.
Well, there's some hope and possibility that we can get going here very, very soon. And in 2025, this thing could actually, there's been some estimates that 400 could accelerate, might go later into 2025. But the idea is to have it up and running in 2025. So that's the status of that system. Then there is the distribution system that takes the GBRA water up from Canyon Lake and brings it up. It's treated down there and brought up to us, the Stallion tank and Church tank. That system is operating. The city's operating on it right now. Now that system also requires ongoing repair, maintenance. There's a dispute that's currently underway between the city and the majority owner of that distribution system. That has to do with some of those repairs and financial responsibility for those repairs. But that dispute has not, we have agreements in place right now. That dispute has not disrupted the flow of the water we need from the lake. And then, of course, we have our own separate internal distribution system for water, operational, but requires ongoing repair and maintenance. So that's the status of that system, all three of those main systems. I want to switch gears and then go into a deeper dive on that one of those systems, and that's the system I call the GBRA water rights, and delivery of those water over the system that comes up from Canyon Lake. Now, as I mentioned earlier, The city has historically relied on Gladwell River. As the mayor mentioned, in 2019, we came off the river to do some major renovation. And since that date, we've been on this Canyon Lake water. Now, the history of Canyon Lake water goes back to 2001 and 2003. That's when the city, in its wisdom, negotiated up a backup supply for that contingency, which was not realized until 2019. And we're here now, 5 years, 4 years later, operating on that contingency. So that was some nice force. Back in 2001 and 2003, the city invested $500,000 and acquired an interest. Those percentages are listed there. Interest in the distribution system to bring that water up from Canyon Lake to what we call the Stallion Tank, south of town. And all these percentages here, Culver's Main, pump station, mixed Mystic Shores, a 16-inch water main, 25%. That's 25% of the million gallon tank. That's the Stallion Tank that I refer to. And then just south of the Stallion Tank, there's another salt main of 50% that right. You got me straight on that today. In any event, that was what the city paid for back in 2001. It was slightly tweaked in 2003. So as of 2003, that's what the city owned or had an interest in, to bring that distribution system from the lake up to the city of Atlanta.
So those percentages, 20% of the 12%, that means we own 20% of a piece of pipe. Or does it mean we have 20% of the capacity of that pipe to move water?
Based on capacity, that's where
That is the next slide, actually, because that's probably the most salient question for this workshop is, what was the nature of the acquisition and what should we do about it going forward as a city? You know,
Also,
really.
those percentages, it's not like owning a percentage of a business. There's no dividends, there's no value. It's not on our books, it can't be sold. What it really is a shared expense. Yeah.
That's one way to look at it.
Just- Yeah.
That's one way to look at it. No, that's a legitimate way to look at it. Let's look at the next slide.
I'm gonna make one thing clear. From the Stallion Estates tank, we own 100% of that pipeline up to the church that's up at Rockin' J and declining to Blanchard. So we own 100% from Stallion Estates on it.
Our tap is just shut this side of the Stallion Tank.
And
Everything is ours.
100% of the easement also.
Do we own the front of it?
Yes.
Do we own the Stallion?
No,
No, we own 25%.
25%.
So we own 100% of the church.
We didn't use the system at all in 2003 or 2019.
Sorry?
We didn't use the system at all in 2019.
Not to my knowledge.
It was meant as a backup system. And that mayor took, I know Martin Herndon remembers it, no matter.
Martha Burton was there when.
Well, and
When this
rather remembers
was
it, there's a few in here that won't remember it. Jim Roderick took absolute a beating. He was, I'm surprised he wasn't started dead. But he was making a deal with the devil. I mean, he was called every name in the book. You will never recall his name.
Oh, I got screenshots.
But I thought it was a good idea then. And I said, Jim, hang in there. And
I'd like to read it in church.
Unfortunately, that happened because. So we continue with the history and Ken, your question is salient. So in 2001, 2003, what the money that traded hands here. By the way, in 2001, Canyon Lake, this is locally owned. This is a conglomeration of a bunch of different water systems all surrounding Canyon Lake. That a bunch of people got together, started buying them up and buying them up and buying them up. Fast forward to 2005, that entity and all the assets of that entity are acquired by San Jose Water, its predecessor, now known as Texas Water. So you have this change back then as well.
It's also important to point out that the name change is good because it's not all Canyon Lake water. They stopped selling water rights out of Canyon Lake a long time ago. All the growth is they have well fields, they have interconnect with saws, they have all kinds of stuff. So we can turn on our tap here and get water from all kinds of sources. It's not just Canyon Lake.
So is it GBRA separate from Texas Water?
Yes, sir.
So the water in the lake is GBRA.
The river
The distribution system.
Yeah, that's the water.
They just deliver it to us. They don't own our water. We own the water. They deliver it to us. Our water to us.
That's the water rights. And that's really important, legally and otherwise. That's the ownership of the water itself. This is just a question of how you move it and get it to where it needs to be. In 2001 and 2003, this is the financial deal right there that you see. For that system I just described to you on the previous slide, the city put in 500,000 roughly, and Canyon Lake Water Supply Company put in a little over 2 million. And that was the deal. And if you go into the notes of the contracting and the discussions back then in that time, what drove the decisions about this year was basically projected capacity usage. So the theory was, well, okay, at the same time we did the deal in 2001, the city did the deal in 2001, it also acquired the 600 acre feet from GBRA. 600 acre feet. Do the numerator, denominator, that division drove then this allocation. If you want to do it roughly speaking, so the total would be 5,400 acre feet at the time. We had 600. When you think about the 89% interest in some of the pipe and 11% interest in the pipe. So go down here and look, for example, the main 16-inch main is item 3 on the list of assets that I mentioned earlier. We invested our money in part for 11% of this 16-inch main that runs along basically east to west, huge long line that runs water as a proportion of projected capacity.
And 500,000 gallons a day is roughly equivalent to 600 a year. It's very.
536.
Yeah.
Yes. And they got, the contract back in the time said 500 gallons per day. It didn't say 536.
That's right.
I think it's significant, but,
Yeah, right.
that's an interesting point. The point though is those interests were basically assigned at the time based on peak capacity usage. Assuming, hey, we're gonna use our 600 acre feet, they're gonna use theirs, and that's how it happened. And the contract also said, it doesn't say, anyway, you shall deliver 600 acre feet. It says the city shall pay Canyon Lake for up to 500 gallons per day, which is significant operational difference and a significant legal difference. So that's the table set. Let's go on to the next slide. And well, hold on, let's go back. Now remember, that's roughly a projection at the time of the usage of the system we bought. Okay?
Would you say that language is in part why we ended up having a crisis last July?
No,
Okay,
no, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of other complicated factors. in
sure,
that.
but it was,
I think the main reason that crisis happened was, I look at it like this. We're on a straw, they're on a spider web. And they're trying to manage a spider web of distribution system, as we're a straw, and our life depends on that straw. If you have with it, we're in trouble. Well, last July, there were issues.
But if it was a shallow delivery,
Yeah, it might have been more helpful, yeah. But, I think there were some issues in any of that that have now, for now, been resolved, and we're looking to try to go forward, after that. So, but this is we made a capacity agreement. Now, that doesn't mean we didn't own pipe. We owned it. Wow. I mean, you can argue about principles of ownership, but, you know, the documents talk about an ownership interest, even though it's derived from the capacity of usage. So, now, what's interesting is all those premises were there back in the day, 2001, 2003, based upon those allocations. And if you look at the population served since then, I used 2005 because 2005 is when Canyon Lake Water Supply is acquired by a publicly traded company, San Jose Water. Okay, and it's, if you want to go on, you can go on New York Stock Exchange and read their reports, give detailed reports about what they do and how they operate. Publicly traded company. You see, from 2005 to 2023, population served. Obviously, a dramatic increase there. Texas Water is adding to a spider web, and it's adding and adding and adding. So you begin a process of the allocation capacity concept becomes less and less relevant over time. Go to the next slide to see. Likewise, water connection. And this data on Texas Water is from the state file. They have to give a annual report to Comal County. They put all it, and they have reports they have to file with the Public Utilities Commission. I've taken some of this numbers from those reports, and you see again the water connections they had back in 2005, where they are in 2023, and Vigo is still, you know, in the 1,100, 1,300 range. Now, as we all know, TxDOT's getting ready to put a bypass in, and that's for a reason. That's where the growth that they project is happening in this area. So maybe this is really going to change. They have an inverse here in the next 10 years. Next slide. No, it's number 9. Yeah. So what's the total available water to each of the entities, and what are they actually using? And this again, I reference this 2022 report that Texas Water did in Comal County. You see their available groundwater and acre feet, the available surface water. We have 1,200. Remember the 600 and 600 we talked about. 600 of it's offline right now because of the water treatment plant. But you see this disparity now emergent, at least as of 2022, where their total demand is 8,000 acre feet. And we're at 362 acre feet right now, averaging. There's a big.
Per day.
So that's acre feet is per year. If you translate it to per day, it's roughly 330,000 per day. And we're permitted to take 536. As the mayor said, we're roughly running about 60% of what we're allowed. The good news is, once we get our water treatment plant back online, you know, we have a lot of reserves. We're running roughly at 330, 350, 380. Now we're going to grow, and we may come up to that 600 pretty quickly over the next 10 years. But that's the good news.
But I think what you're saying is with both systems online, we have double that capacity.
Yes, sir.
Up to more than 1 million gallons per day.
we'll only use about 30% of it.
Correct. But understanding, of course, we really can only use one source at a time. Until we get them blended.
Until we get them.
And we could blend it and bring them both into the same point and access those simultaneously.
And then huge, they quadruple the size.
Water connections, that's water connections, that's not population.
Correct. Population's up above, the next one.
Their growth is shown to quadruple. And that's because they're a private water company, they sell connections, right?
Well, I think.
Are they required to provide a connection?
we're the only, as far as I know, community that doesn't have Texas Water Company meters. Everybody, they're a retail
My point though
company.
is, do they have control over that 85,000? Are they selling connections as fast as they can?
Well,
So they're,
there's a complicated answer to that. They have, a lot of different water rights and distribution rights. Some of which are derived from things we call a CCN, which is basically a license to provide water to certain geographical areas that the state allows. And they have been, both, the region has been growing, so their customer base has been growing, and they have been acquiring this subdivision, you know, they've been growing their own system.
And
They already publicly traded company.
well, I guess where I'm coming from, if Texas is granting them the authority to be the provider in a certain region, it would seem to me that Texas would have some oversight that says Blanco is one of your oldest customers. You can't underserve Blanco because you want to hire a new customer. You want to get a new customer.
Well, there's some legitimacy to that idea, but again, they are regulated by the Public Utility Commission. They have to go, or their rates are set, approved by the Public Utility. And that's another area where you can go in and actually see, I don't remember the return on investment, but their return on investment is set by the PUC. I think it's between 8 and 10%. So they're not allowed by law to go, you know, nuts on, there's a regulatory process that they're subject to.
And they can't oversell their water sources either.
That's my point.
No, they can't.
If they're doing that at our expense, that
No,
would be.
no, they cannot.
It's not
They can't touch our water. And,
Well-
or our rights, and they can't oversell their sources. If you look at that rundown where it says, where was that? About water rights they have versus how much they use. Yeah. Texas water, available groundwater, available surface water, and the total demand is just a fraction of that. They can't legally oversell.
What's the next?
They've got a,
Okay, next slide.
they've got a complicated web of regulatory issues they have to deal with every day. Thank God we don't have that much to deal with, but the point is there are TCQ issues, PUC issues, financial disclosure issues that they're dealing with that we don't necessarily, now we have our whole system.
We're like their Cielo Springs, if you're familiar with that situation there, they have to serve us, and period.
Yes, that's our position. That's our position.
And that's why I bring up the question.
And I think it is the proper position.
Yeah.
Let's go to item 10. In summary, you know, basically what happens is over from 2005 to now, we've got this growing, it's not a fault, it's just, I'm making a statement of fact, a disconnect between the original model that drove the ownership decisions of that system to what's actually happening on the ground. Okay, and that drives decisions we need to make about how much you want to invest, how much you want to retain, all these things we're going to talk about here in a moment. But a little more history first. Go to the next slide. So that sets the table. Now, as I mentioned, by 2015 for third, they're growing. We're basically stable. You know, things are going well. 4 years later, we have to take our water treatment plant offline. Okay, and in her wisdom, the mayor at the time was Preston Wood, as we see. Mayor Hurd negotiated a provision in that agreement that said, among other things, hey, they went to Canyon Lake Water, city did, that, hey, we're about to take our system offline, and we're gonna be 100% reliant on you. Okay? So among other things, they agreed, at least during the time during which the plant is offline, that Canyon Lake Water would do all reasonable efforts to be sure they supply deliver up to 500 gallons per day. Okay? And that agreement is still in place as we speak.
Expiration date on it?
The way it's written right now, well, that's a legal question. The document itself says, that when we bring the water treatment plant back online, that document expires. That's what it says. I'm not sure that's what it really means. But anyway, that's another issue.
Sorry.
We're not gonna get into legal stuff. The point is, that's a huge watershed moment. We take that system offline. Now, simultaneously,
We'll take it offline.
Permanent.
And, I mean,
yes,
and it gets passed. It passes all the tests.
precisely.
Yes.
And that, well, we're hoping, we'll see, that next one happens, 2025 and 2026. While all that's going on, as I mentioned earlier, Texas Water is growing and adding a lot of customers and capacity to their system. They take a decision. Remember, we own 11% or 25%, different percentages of the system. Remember? They spend from 2015 to 2022, because they need the capacity. They spend almost $10 million on upgrades, primarily to replace the entire FM 306 main, that 16-inch main we're talking about. And they turn around at us, there's a long stack of letters that start and invoices that start to the city from Canyon Lake saying, hey, you owe us 11%, 11%, 11%. And now that total is about $990,000. Okay? That they claim we owe them.
The original contract talked about maintenance of our.
It had some language about maintenance. The dispute really relates to maintenance versus capital expense and things like that. The point really is, there's a claim, we dispute it. There's a claim, we dispute it. So that sets up the questions we have to answer for ourselves as a community. It's separate from the legal issues. There's a lot of very good legal issues that support our position. They think there's a lot of great legal issues to support theirs. It is what it is. You still have to, as a community, decide what you want to do as a policy matter.
Let me ask you something, because I think it was in one of the mediation downtime, where you sort of walked through what would look like if we fought them, if they actually went to guns over that. I think you said it's not really a scenario where we get out of paying nothing.
Well, I don't want to get into that.
Sure. But anywhere you go, there's gonna be,
Yeah.
if it's fought,
There's a lot of, starting with the fact that they know and we know, litigation is incredibly expensive. I mean, and not to be taken lightly, particularly where you're dealing with the issue as complicated as this and as critically important. Now, I will tell you, if it came to it, I wouldn't bat an eye recommend to this city that it fight for its water, period. So I don't want any question about that in this discussion. There are some legal rights, but we're not here to talk about that. I don't want to get into that in detail. It's just not appropriate. But we dispute their claims, they dispute ours. We've gone into mediation, and we've been in mediation with them for a year, more than a year. We have an interim agreement in place where they're keeping the stallion tank at certain levels while we determine what we want to do going forward. So that's the current recent history of issues. And it brings us to open discussion, thoughts, theories, opinions on some of the issues. And I just made a short list of issues. a lot of other issues for y'all to think about. We can go to that. You know, what is our future need? As I mentioned earlier, we have this wind trial coming. We think we're growing. TxDOT thinks we're growing. A lot of people think we're growing, and I think the developers think we're growing. So we're gonna have, I think, more need for more water, even though we might have a fair amount of cushion. With ownership comes maintenance burden. Part of the issue that is currently in place right now is they claim we owe them $900,000 for maintenance and repair. We say, no, that was for your benefit. You guys were the guys growing, and you did that for your benefit. And so there's an argument back and forth about that. But it still sets up the issue. What are we prepared to pay to maintain that system? You know,
When they did that, did they call their fellow owners and say, we're considering making this capital improvement as a part owner? Do you agree with it, or did they just do it? Tell us, send us a bill.
they told us,
So we
And we
knew there was
disputed it.
expense coming.
and we disputed it at that time. So it's been kind of a long running. I mean, there's letters in the file where Mayor Hurd tells them, we don't owe you for capital expense. We just didn't have to expense. There's back and forth all throughout this process. Point remains, you know, what do you do going forward? Do you fight it or do you try to resolve it?
No, the dispute is over whether it's maintenance or whether it's capital.
Right.
And sometimes they intertwine.
Well, back in history, it is a fact that the original pipe that got put in was PVC, leaky. There's records that show a tremendous amount of leakage. Meanwhile, they're growing, and there's memos throughout the file that reference the fact that from their point of view, they had no choice but to replace the pipe with a concrete ductile, heavy duty pipe, because they're growing and they need the capacity, no question. Did that benefit us? Well, yeah, but no.
When we meter it, isn't it? We meter when we receive it, or we
We
meter
meter
when it leaves their plant.
When it comes, well, there's a price fixed every year. There's an availability fee that's paid every year, that's adjusted on a index, and then there's a usage fee on top of that.
So I guess my point is, if the meter is right outside their plant, and they put 1 million gallons through that meter, we pay for 1 million gallons, and a bunch of it leaks between there and here.
Or the meter after the stallion tank, when it
We're
leaves the stallion.
metered on
On
our
this end,
side.
Okay, yeah, after the stallion. That's where our hookup is, basically, is the stallion.
Because
But
it's
the point
limited all the
remains-
way up. That's the only place where it's accurate for us as to what we took.
That, for purposes of measuring the volume of water, yes. But, there's a lot of evidence that pipe, PVC pipe, that we were jointly owning, leaking a lot of water that was,
But you said they increased the size of it. They didn't just replace it.
only in one case. Most of it was replaced from the same size, but the material was different, from PVC. There was also a lot of discussion about was it properly installed back in the day? Was it properly bedded? And, you know, a lot of discussion about over time, the pressure rocks on that pipe caused leaks, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got a maintenance side and an ownership side of this, and where we are now, we're in mediation. Texas Water has proposed a firm delivery obligation contract.
It did not exist in the previous contract.
You know what?
That was, farm delivery was not
Correct.
addressed in the previous contract.
Correct.
It was an up to.
It was just, well, it didn't even say delivery. It said, the city will pay for up to.
So they're not obligated to deliver that.
Well, yes, Yeah,
Didn't
I
help, huh?
I think they're obligated to pay. It's certainly implied. If we pay, you're gonna deliver. Yeah. So, but it wasn't a firm delivery. It was up to. The proposal they're making now is, if you need 535,000 gallons per day, we will deliver, period. Okay? And then there's mechanisms, if we go over that, for instance, if we have a huge leak, which we experienced here recently last winter, where our usage went off the chart for a couple of days, during the freeze. Those kind of situations, there's a protocol where we gotta notify them, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully, very rarely happens.
And this proposal is the end result of a lot of work and back and forth and negotiating and regulating and stuff. It's not just, hey, here's this. We fought for this.
Yeah, it's 18 months of, well, 14 months of discussions back and forth, and they want us to go to 1% ownership across the board of all those assets. And in turn, they are offering the firm delivery and a capped maintenance expense. It doesn't ever fluctuate. They can repair the whole system, and we have a steady amount we pay them no matter what. Well,
It's an annual number.
no, that's a monthly number, so that's $60,000 a year. That's proposal.
Just
And mind you,
availability.
we haven't said yes to this. Part of the reason why we're here talking about it.
What is the 1%?
Versus
That keeps us having rights as an owner. It keeps us from being regulated by the PUC, which we don't want to go that direction. It maintains all the rights we currently have. Again, the percentage there, the more we get, we don't get anything from that. It's just a share of expenses going forward. So if we have 2%, means we pay double the expense. It doesn't carry on our books, doesn't give us dividends, and we can't sell it.
And so to be clear, as you think of the age of the distribution system that they have, we're now starting to move into the high maintenance phase. Because you've already got 20, 25 years of history, life is maybe 40. They might be able to put 45 out of it. So now they're gonna be in maintenance, replacements, all of those types of things. And if we can be on the 1% edge of that versus 11%, that's a big number.
Well, you,
Because our elevated tank, we need to do some repairs and things like that. It's 6 figures, but their elevated tank down by the water plant is probably 4 times larger than ours. So this is only 500, isn't that right?
You talking about stallion tank or
No.
mystic tank?
Their elevated tank where they
Mystic?
store our percent of water, which is.
I know it's a mystic tank.
No,
Yeah, it's the million. Yeah, it's the million, 25% of the million gallon.
That's how-
elevated
That's a stallion
tank.
tank.
And they
No,
go,
this is the elevated tank, 25.
25% is a stallion tank.
25%, it says here, is for the elevated storage tank located at the northwest corner of Stallion Estates. It's not an elevated tank. It's a GST.
Okay.
okay, well, then-
It's the stallion tank.
Right. But we have interest in that elevated tank by the plant.
To be clear, we're not regulated by the PUC on account of 1% or not. 1% gives us some rights as owners that are different substantively from just being any old customer. It puts us more into a wholesale status versus a resale status, which is really potentially a big deal.
I think that's important. Sorry for interruption, but on that point, I believe I had to go through the crisis we got last July, where they had major leaks and they were delivering to the retail customers instead of the wholesale. So we were kind of the redheaded stepchild of water delivery until they fixed the major problem.
Well, this contract we have is firm delivery.
yeah, but if they say that we broke down, we can't deliver it.
Well, that's
not what happened last year.
Ostensibly, that
That
wasn't.
was a human decision last year.
And it wasn't clear that the Texas water proposal, the 1% 5,000 that replaces the $990 or $962,000 that there's a claim. So that wasn't clear, that's what goes.
And see, Ray,
I was gonna
see,
say that.
while the extra shares don't have value to us, it has value to them. So we've been able to use that to
$60,000 a year
negotiate.
when you raise $1 million, argument.
Why is that right?
Yeah.
They're gonna forgive that maintenance
$990,000.
that they say we owe.
So that's, that's the basic setup on the issues here and the argument back and forth. There's some, in my mind, critically important that the city remain an owner at some percentage. But it's not ownership in the way we normally think of ownership. Like you own a piece of stock and you get the upside and the downside. This is really just downside with an upside that we're a wholesale, or we think of ourselves as wholesale. And that's important, no question.
And I've proposed to you, that if we do this, we put that 1% in a lockbox, basically an ordinance that if any future council wants to look at that, it has to be a supermajority and a referendum before they can touch that 1%. I think that we should do something.
Because the 1% is your,
That would be required anyway, wouldn't it?
What does that?
Under state law, if you sell a general law municipality sells its water system, you gotta go referendum. Period. But we're not selling our water system.
At the 1%, I think we should do what we can now to preserve it for the future.
We have another ordinance that also says, a local ordinance, that says if we sell our water rights, it requires a supermajority of city council. So we have two, the state level restriction and a current, so you could do some other local restriction as well. If you wanted to put it more into a lockbox.
Is that the only percentage that changed? Is the one that went from 12% to 1%? We still have the 25% of that tank?
1% across the board.
1%.
yeah, and it just limits our exposure to their capital improvements or maintenance or whatever.
And what about the capital improvements you said are needed right now in the tank?
Well,
That's
those
what
are
they
maintenance
feel.
items,
And we're still be responsible for that?
1%. On their system.
If we signed the deal today, those needs are still there on the tanks.
For them, yes.
We would be transferring where now, a year from now, or 2 years, or 5 years from now.
Yeah.
The mayor's gonna want a CO to fix that tank.
Well,
They're working on the Stallion tank, and we're effectively on the hook for 25% of that right now.
Yeah, so this would be the
this
benefit.
would back it up.
This is a cash flow issue.
And the first, I don't know how many iterations, the back and forths, the mediation, that said it taking us down to 0. They wanted us, we have fought and kept that foot in the door, that state ownership. They can't get rid of that.
So this would buy us the rights, 536,000 gallons a day.
Delivery obligation. We already have that
Yeah,
water.
but
This
this
is
is
just-
required
this is about
to
infrastructure.
deliver it. So if we built 536,000 gallon tank out here, and we wanted to sell our water, then are we a water system? We use that on the river most of the time, but we put a valve in there, we start selling.
Oh, yeah.
How much do we pay them per gallon is what I'm getting at versus what we sell.
I can't recite for you chapter and verse.
My point is, can we turn this into can we pay off $60,000 a year by selling water to the local water trucks or to subdivision?
We're limited, we can operate as retail municipally owned utility. We're not gonna get into the business of, because then we subject ourselves to PUC.
That's why I meant.
Regulation. And we started getting into, well, let's go basically competing with them.
Yeah.
You could, but I wouldn't recommend doing that unless we're ready to really invest.
We need to have Steve Mack look into that a little bit.
Well, no, I mean, that is the issue, because if we transfer from TCEQ to PUC, that's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare in terms of rate structure and everything, because then everybody comes out of the woodwork. Plus, we would much rather be in a position, I think, that if someone outside the city is wanting water, we'll go, great, let us annex you in and we'll get you water out there. We'll figure out how to do that, but we're not gonna let you get a free ride on our ticket of water.
But that water source would allow us to do that.
Not disputing that. Not
Well, I
disputing
know,
that.
I'm
I'm
just
just saying.
saying, the subdivision wants
But
them out
that's
there,
your
we
choice.
want them out there as our neighbor. That, then you give us the ability to accept them.
I'm shocked to say it, but we take the same way.
Martha?
There's a great deal of history that's been presented to you tonight, and we lived through it. In 1999, we basically were told that we had about, and Ms. Penny will correct me, council member, that if I'm wrong, about 75 days of water left in the river to use. And everybody got together, and there was a massive prayer. And Minister Sam,
My party's already seated somewhere.
you get the 5 inches of rain. What these people did is they got together and they worked hard. So this is what is one line. I apologize for what you're reading.
Hi there. How y'all doing? Good, good.
I like your shirt. You got the house like I love that. I could write. Yeah, are you the right thing?
Whatever you ordered is the right thing.
Praise God. And drank water out of the place. They were so proud of what I had done. Please move forward. This is too vital for this community. I'd like to have water when I get up in the morning.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. And that is in part of why, at least from my point of view, you would never, ever, you argue about choosing 1%, 5%, 6%, whatever. You never give up a percentage ownership. And I'll be frank, Texas Water doesn't like that. They want it, they've been trying to buy the whole thing for, in fact, when I first came on city attorney, like in my first month, there was a letter from the previous manager saying, we want to buy the system and we'll forgive the debt, you zero, and you just become a customer and have a great day. So, keeping some ownership is critical.
This is a question that you probably answer. But it doesn't seem to me, you know, it doesn't seem to me like that's part has been honest, a good partner in this relationship. And then if they're private, they're trying to get everything out we can. Even though we will have a document, we trust this company to live up to that, because if the river goes dry, that daily guarantee, it's gotta be more than a piece of paper. We really have to have it. I don't know how you judge that, but
Well, I don't, number one, I don't think they're dishonest, okay? I think they are a for-profit business. And they're driven by the typical for-profit operations. There have been issues in the past of operational issues and why certain decisions were made. Those have been addressed and are part of an agreement right now that allows us to continue to operate the way we are operating. This is designed to try to move us past that in one direction or the other. We're going to do something like this, and I'm not here today to advocate either way. I'm here to just say, that's what they're proposing. What do we do about it?
this erases the lawsuit.
Yes.
Or potential loss.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no lawsuit
The
going.
960.
Yeah, potential expense.
This eliminates that $1 million.
Right.
And earlier you said if needed to, you would be proud to defend the city's case in court. What if we won that? We don't owe them a nickel on maintenance. Can we live with the agreement we got today?
I think we end up, we would exonerate and have the court interpret the document to say they in fact have an obligation to deliver water at that level. And they would indeed do that. The question that would come up, for the moment that would seem great, but If we sustain our current ownership levels, it's not Kentucky talking, it's everybody in this room talking. If you own 11% of something and you're deriving capacity from that thing, that's the benefit. When it breaks down, you're expected to pony up 11%. I mean, isn't that the way profit and loss works? I mean, you're gonna to keep your interest in that. And there's
So we're betting that $5,000 a month is bargain, it's going to be a bargain. As long as this contract.
So under the terms of this is undivided interest. And so we would have no say in there saying, we want to make payments. We go, no, we don't want to do that. They go, too bad, you're a minority owner, we're doing it, get your checkbook out. Right? So if we're at 1%, we go, okay, here's $10,000 check.
So we
$1 million
would, our
bucks.
$5,000 would be 5,000 plus 40%.
Plus what?
The $5,000 is not our contribution for maintenance.
It is for maintenance. So the 1% is for capital improvements and maintenance. What they're doing is capping it on maintenance. So instead of them having to write us a bill for 1% of a replacing a pump for $10,000, they're out of that. They just draw out of that pool that's already sitting there.
So a couple things I think that could be done to ensure that the availability is there. One being, I think if we look into how we can go back and forth between the two and just keep pulling from them, maybe not pull them out, but enough that we know it's working. But also one thing we learned is they're a publicly traded company. We're a wholesome little major town, and the David Goliath thing really plays well in the press, and it really hurts them. Their stock price was suffering when we had that crisis because of we were squawking. So that brought them to they're susceptible. They're state regulated and publicly traded, so they're susceptible to public pressure on two fronts. And believe me, it works.
I also mentioned something as well. And again, people come and go, relationships change in time. When I first got here 2.5 years ago, president of Texas Water, we didn't have a relationship. One time that person called, threatened that we needed to pay. We now have a relationship. I can say I actually have her cell phone number. She's called me at 10 at night when there's a problem with an issue. So I would say at least right now, I'm not saying it will always be this way, but we have a relationship at the top with the president. I think the mayor probably has her phone number as well. And we are able to, not saying that will always be the case, but we are able to work with this organization better than we have in the past.
Well, and frankly, I don't, unless we're ready to build another pipe, what real choice do we have but to try and dance with who run us? And I will say, the mayor's correct, there was issues in this recent past that were not good. But the current leadership, there's a focus on us for good reason, because we're growing, and there's a reason why they're coming up with firm delivery contracts.
They heard us and they responded. They moved that guy out and brought somebody else in, and have been very responsive to us.
I'm telling you some questions. Purely based on, I'm trying to understand it, but behind all of that, seems to me there's two currencies here. One is $3 and the other is water. And to me, water currency, 20 years from now, is going to be a whole lot more valuable. We need to understand that as you finalize whatever the number is going to be. Because without water, this town will go away.
Yeah, so they,
That's got to truly be guaranteed.
so they'll have it, so we pay wholesale rates. We're the only entity that gets wholesale rates from them because we're a city MRTC regulated. So everything is on a national water sewer index. And so basically that's the percentage by which things escalate or de-escalate in terms of cost. And so it's a national thing from the Bureau. It seems to work. I think over the past 10 years, it's been plus or minus a half, 3/4 to 3%.
And technically, we're not even I mean, we're not buying water from them. They are delivering our water to us.
Right, but it's the wholesale
That's right.
price for treatment
Yeah.
that is indexed.
Yeah.
Right. But our overall cost that we pay for it is, that we pay to GDRA, that's a fixed.
So Texas Water is doing the treating or GBRA is doing the treating?
Texas Water does the treatment.
Let's look at another wrinkle. Go back to, the chart that shows the percentage interest. I want to show you an illustrative example. The same issues are presented here. Here's one other way to look at this situation, okay? The one that shows number 5, okay? Okay. Now, there's 5 assets there, right? And we own a percentage of each asset, all right? Now, remember I said earlier in the history that Texas Water spent about $10 million to replace, upgrade, renovate these assets. They spent that $10 million on asset number 1, asset number 2, asset number 3, okay? They didn't do anything yet to the Stallion tank nor this other pipe here. Now, they're getting ready to have to do some work on Stallion, which is going to cost money. We own 25% of it. If we retain, the same issue applies. If we own 25% of something, okay, here's, for every dollar you give me 25 cents. And so there's still that issue. But at the present moment, there's another way to look at this. Now, as of, go back to the investment right here. This ain't number 6. Number 6. Okay. In 2001 and 2003, you see the proportions there: 2.1 million and 512,000. Okay. All right. That's the dollar investment, capital investment that each party made at the time. Remember, I said they spent $10 million on those 3 assets from 2015 to 2022. So currently, the proportion is on those 3 assets, a proportion of 512 versus a proportion of 2 million plus $10 million. So one way to look at it in round numbers is that our total spend on this system is $512,000. Their total spend on the system is $12 million. Okay? If you just do the division under that, one number, the large number is a denominator, the other number is a numerator. Across all assets, if you applied it to all assets, even the assets they have not touched yet, we would be at 4% ownership, diluted. If you applied that same calculus to just the 3 assets, we would own only 2.5% of those 3 assets, and then the 25 and 50% of the other 2. So when they propose 1%, and 1% is not acceptable in my opinion, but if you think about it in those raw numerical numerator denominator points of view, you're in sort of the ballpark with the concept of the investment that each partner has made. Particularly if you focus on those first 3 assets here. And by the way, most of that money, number 5, yeah, most of that money was spent on this 32,000 foot 16-inch main that was replaced from PVC, leaky PVC to concrete ductile. And that ain't going away for a long time. So that's another way to look at this situation, is that proportional. 1% still not acceptable in my mind, but it's closer to 2% and 4%. I can think of it that way.
And they have back up. That 500,000 that we put in the original, these are 2.1 million that they put in the original. Have they argued that that's 20% of the 2.6 million. And that's the percentage that should apply.
No, they have not. Because, the percentages vary among the assets for different reasons. So that's where you see this 20%, 11. Basically, with the exception of the main that's closest to us, the major pipe is 11% interest based on throughput capacity. The storage tanks are just based upon a number projected. Okay, you're gonna get 20% of the total fill. You know, you're gonna use that. So, but it's an interesting way to look at the situation. I still don't think it still demonstrates the disconnect between capacity decision making and actual reality of what's happening on the ground proportionally between the parties. And it's ironic to me that, the percentages on a just mathematical basis are closer to 1% than you would have thought, if you really do the numbers, but not 1%.
I'm curious, you keep saying 1% because, it's too low, but if we're getting the same amount of water, why would we want to pay 2% or 3%?
Well, and that's the argument.
When there's no upside.
If it's-
Yeah.
is there
There's
no-
no upside to it.
Yeah, why
Other
don't
than
you just-
we gotta write a check.
Yeah, it seems like the lowest number we can get, so we want that, right?
Well, that's one argument, because you're lowering, if you agree that all that 1% really represents as a maintenance obligation. My position is, yes, of course, that is crucial, but the 1%, 2%, 3% also represents ownership wholesale status in my mind, right? And look at it this way. It's gonna be a lot different if we ever end up in court, walking in saying, dear judge, I own 3% of this versus I own 1%.
And he's gonna say that's negligible. I don't-
Yeah.
Yeah, he might.
Is it worth, we could calculate what it might cost us for 10 years to hold on to an extra percent.
Correct.
And
And
that
that's
would
a
be
big number. That's a
Yeah.
big number.
Well,
So there's
easier to pay attorneys than it is to pay.
It's valuable. to
Or a
Texas
jury
law.
trial.
But
Well-
on 1%, if you think about 1%, that's capital improvements and big maintenance beyond our maintenance number. So if they have to replace any line, any pumps, any of that, all we do is have to pay our 1% if it's on our side of the distribution system of their spite of way.
So to clarify that, we would pay 5,000 for maintenance regardless of what maintenance they do. And then if they do a capital expenditure, we would pay 1% of that.
Correct.
No matter what it was.
No matter what it is.
But okay, you can.
Well, I'm just saying.
Capital expenditure that has something to do with our.
Yeah, for them to distribute to us, if it's a capital expense, we'd only pay 1% of that number. Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, you just said capital and big maintenance. What is big maintenance as opposed to?
Well,
It'll be
so if they do big maintenance, we're only obligated, they gotta draw from our 5,000. We don't
Only
pay,
control.
that's just.
Well, I can be clear, the 5,000 is their proposal. We have not accepted.
Right, but in essence, the way it reads right now, that is the deal, right? We're battling to get it down to like 2,500 or something, but that's what we're working on. But the main issue is, we don't wanna expose the city to cash outlays for an improvement that, yes, it benefits us, but it benefits them way more than it does us. And so 1% seems to be okay.
You don't, I mean, the one thing you want to avoid is you don't want to be back 10 years from now arguing about $1 million capital expense. But really, and you think about it from a usage point of view, didn't really benefit us as much as it benefits that, sense of customer use. So,
But as long as we get our 500 and some odd thousands of gallons a day guaranteed.
Well, that's why I said, should we be drawing our 500,000 gallons or some portion of that for our own use, because we make one every 20 years and never need to Canyon Lake water. We're paying $5,000 a month. We have to get some water out of the deal that we can turn into a.
Real quick, we sent you a lot of information. I know there's a lot probably flying over. I know it took me probably weeks to really understand this. guess the question I have for the public, that's what we really want to see, what people kind of gauging interest, what people think. You heard 1%, you're hearing all these different percentages, and I just want to hear if there's anyone that has kind of a counter argument. Maybe you want to look at 2%, maybe you want to look at other things, but I want people to be comfortable and say, hey, we're here because there were other council members and other people I've heard that have maybe different points of view. So if you have that, feel free to say something because we're here to hear you.
Was that example that Tim gave earlier when he showed that actually it's like a partnership? If you've got a minority partner who doesn't make his contribution and the majority partner puts all the money in, he gets diluted down to a point that if you took a look at it today, that ratio that Tim just gave showed that if we haven't made the contributions and they have, we're diluted down to 4%. Just right now, if you use this as a snapshot in time.
Right, absolutely, that's what would happen. They're not willing to do that. They're saying, you take the 1% and we'll forgive the 900,000. Otherwise, we're gonna be in a lawsuit for that $900,000.
Seems like the court would look at it similar to.
Yeah, but it's undivided interest. So they have controlling interest. So it's whatever they determine needs to be done.
Which is what a managing partner or a majority partner usually does.
Yeah, but it's the context of an undivided interest that makes it unique in the water business.
Well, there's a number of different arguments both ways. And to me, the real question is, and I think you need to be willing to pay in maintenance. If you don't have a market, you don't have an asset that you can sell. It gives you certain rights that you don't have. It gives you an argument that you're a wholesale customer. It gives you a more forcible argument as an owner, but it's not like I can put it up for sale and sell 1% interest. And the city will never do that. So it gives us that benefit. It's a different type of ownership than the normal ownership, but with it comes the more I own, the more on the downside, I'm going to be responsible for maintaining more of it. Unless I get some other type of argument on that.
If I may, I think I want to underscore the benefit that's not being talked about much here and agree with Martha that securing that guaranteed delivery of 33,000 gallons is huge. Never had that. And we're allowed to buy after that, potentially, but the guaranteed delivery, especially since Texas Water has other assets outside of Canyon Lake, they're not just depending on Canyon Lake. And it's huge for both. Where I go around the state, and especially the public in Blanco, they go, what are you guys going to do? And so we have a guaranteed delivery. We also have, in the history, our water plant coming back online, whether we mix them or not. We're talking about possibly dredging out some of those, so there's more storage behind those dams. You know, between those two places, I think Blanco could be more secure in water than they've been ever. And so that's huge.
This is a good point you just made that hasn't been made tonight yet. That is that, like I said earlier, they got a spider web system. We got a strong.
We're not depending on just Canyon Lake.
Correct. They're pulling water in from various, our rights are that they have not heard that. But water flows, around. And so, yes, and so.
In theory, we can water from Carrizo through Saws up through.
Depending upon where it goes, they're different. That's my system.
All right. We're running our city off of the river. Plant's working, we're running off of it. But we pump some water from Canyon Lake. Put it in a tank, and we use it to provide the services to our annexed citizens that do not have a pipeline running by their house. We have an obligation to give them water and sewer. Could we truck water or have a contractor truck it from our Canyon Lake water to our citizens and meet our obligations, as opposed to building a new pipeline 3 miles out to our annex.
Your own citizens.
It's a hard balance on that one because if you, the water we're buying from Canyon Lake has a storable time, like shelf life on it. So it'd be nice if we could put a 20 million gallon tank in to build it up, save it for a while, but we have to use it in a short period of time for it. That are having contaminated levels.
That's the point. Hold it period just to do it.
No, but it's a good idea, but that's a problem we have to overcome in order to do it.
It's only chunk what you only get from Canyon Lake, what you can distribute to your users. When you start building these pipelines, that's all we're getting upstairs. It's gonna be expensive.
And that's why we let the elevated tank come down quite a bit before we build it again, so we don't have to deal with levels and stratification of different water.
How long can it be stored? Anybody have?
Usually, maybe up to,
Days, weeks, months?
Tommy,
not a, what do you think?
I thought it was there in a short period. I was thinking for 3 to 4 days. I thought.
Just on surface water, you don't have to do the mixing, just surface water and get it.
Why is that? Because you use conversion with it.
Found to primarily in Sauls in Texas, water a lot of these facilities. I come from big pipes, 30-inch pipes, 60-inch pipes. One distinction you haven't made here is developed waters versus, well, groundwater versus. There's state-owned water, and then there's private. Something that hasn't been mentioned is San Jose Water invested $18 million to secure 15,000 acre feet of water in the Carrizo Sands. Right, and it's the thought. So that, if it's groundwater, you can move it across basin lines, you can move it across river. Groundwater is not state water. So one thing that hasn't been mentioned is in San Antonio's case, and especially now in New Braunfels' case, the Carrizo water is totally private water. You can do with it what you want after you got it. We don't sit with the rock, turn it over and do it well. But the water coming south is going to I mean, there's all of the that are appropriate. The Canyon has secured their 15,000 acre feet. GBRA did not want a private company selling wholesale water. So GBRA paid $30 million to San Jose water, so San Jose actually just got out of the business, and now GBRA has water. Something to really seriously talk about is GBRA has commingled all their water. San Antonio water system has commingled all their water. So when you buy it out of the pipe, really should buy it in all possible groundwater. Right? This gets so complex. I mean, the issue is. But I mean, as long as we're in a parallel pipe. Yeah, so as long as we're tied into GBRA, we can have access to more water. Yeah, at some point. And that's what Bernie's doing, and that's what New Braunfels is doing. They're paying as if they're buying Carrizo water, right, from 60 miles away, but they're actually using Canyon Lake water. They're just co-mingling. And so the issue with storage is because we chlorinate the water, it dissipates over time. And that's what you're measuring is the what the level of chlorination in there that you can still viably discharge it or not discharge it.
Because I keep rainwater and I can save it a long time and I don't chlorinate it, so I don't worry about losing the chlorine.
Well, that's right.
And
Hopefully you're not,
private.
hopefully
Hopefully nothing.
Hopefully you're not tied to the, city system.
No.
Okay. Because if that occurred in the city,
Oh, I know.
if somebody tied in, then we requested to put a backflow preventer on there, if we would expect it.
That's a whole other water, that's a whole other water.
Yes, but we don't have enough people to administer that, so.
Whole other water workshop.
To Warren's question about if anybody had anything else or whatever, Candy, do you have something you're trying hard not to say or what?
Yes.
I just said she's like the water, you're very independent, something, so I feel like she should say something about it. This was her, he said, if anyone has something to say, so if you're gonna have something to say.
I promised Mr. Tuggy I would go home.
Oh,
But she has that one item from 1972.
That's
that
right.
Might be relevant.
where are you on this agreement? Yeah, okay, because you can't stay,
I'm not in a one at all.
you're not, 1%. Okay.
Well, if you don't go up to 1%, they're gonna raise their demand for 5,000, so.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a
And
negotiation piece.
I understand the math on it, but the, just inside me just says, right, that's not the right thing to do. You know how you have a gut feeling? And I just have a gut feeling. And that's all I had.
Can I ask what percent you would be happy with?
I don't have.
No.
It's like.
That's all you see. No,
You know,
You can answer if you wish.
No, I'm not. Honestly,
I'm
I
just
do.
curious if it, 2, 3, 10, to, what would give us
I
more of a
really, I haven't gotten it. But yeah, it's just the gut at no one, for sure.
Is it because of the distrust of that they're gonna?
I'm not gonna say, I'm not gonna answer that I'm gonna think of it.
Okay.
How heavy a bat do you have to go in there, Tim?
Say what?
How heavy a bat do you have to go in there?
I would have a very heavy bat. The heaviest bat was this one right here, a couple of years ago. But we were holding it back.
I stopped talking to the media when Bloomberg Wall Street called me for a quote
Okay,
about
we're not
Texas Water
going
Company.
there.
So I stopped talking to them then, but we made our impact.
We're past that. We have some very good legal arguments. The question is, the price to make those arguments is high for both parties. Not only in outlay to attorneys, but in terms of goodwill in their respective communities and all the things that go with that. In my humble opinion, this is not acceptable, but it's in the ballpark. It's in the ballpark. So I like what she says not 1%. Okay.
I want to also add a little color. I've been watching this from afar for almost a year, I suppose. And I want to thank all three of you guys, the mayor and Warren and Tim, for negotiating as hard as you have. I know it took several mediations. One, I feel like there was one point where the city got up and just walked out. So these guys have tried hard to get to this offer. So in my opinion, I think we should be pretty close. We just got to get dancing well over a year, and we're in a lot better place than we were a year ago, probably when these negotiations started. So that's certainly my opinion. Whether it's 1 or 1.1, 1.2, I don't care. We just need to get to the deal.
Okay. Whatever it ends up being, I would rather it be more of a citizen decision than a council decision.
Yep.
So that's why everyone's here. Because we need to get input, and that's why it might be that when this was first in the series. It is my fault that this was done today and wasn't given more time, because I'm going to be out of town next Tuesday. It was scheduled for next Tuesday. So this is totally my fault, and the next one should be bigger and better.
Is there a deadline when you have to make this decision?
There's an operation, I mean, we can't go on for
It's an implied.
near term, but there's not a drop dead. Things go cool.
When did the intermediate agreement start evaporating, the temporary?
We have an interim agreement that, in March of next year. So if you want to say there's a deadline, maybe that's a deadline.
These little side agreements that we use to make sense of this whole thing, they start to expire and it could get bad.
I would say end of the year, we should have something put together and signed, sealed, and delivered. I'd say end of the year, but I'd like it sooner than that, but I think end of the year would be reasonable.
I have a budget question, like, is that $5,000 in y'all's budget somewhere? That y'all just did
60,000 per year.
6,000 per year, do you have that in there?
Oh, no, we already have a maintenance fee that's.
We have a
baked in.
maintenance fee, I don't know if it's, I'll have to check if it's actually.
There's some amount, but it's not that amount.
Exactly,
We
exactly.
have to
One item
figure out
for
how
everybody,
to-
because we're already paying something.
It would take a budget amendment probably mid-year to.
Or you defer it into the next year.
And then philosophically, will there be an idea to reduce our dependence on them at some point?
The
Like,
water plant comes online.
well, so hopefully that happens at some point.
Yeah.
Is there also, conversations about city ordinances that encourage people to do some sort of rainwater harvesting? Are any of those other ideas on the table?
The city council passed, 23 water quality ordinance that is state of the art. In my opinion, it is a model that we now use in all of our permitting, all of our activity and development activity. You know, we're not developing at the rate of Austin, but, the model that we adopted is a model that's been adopted throughout the hill country. And I think broad support across all political spectrums to help preserve water.
We're also actively looking for other sources for the long term. We're not saying we got these two and that's it. We're looking for, but I want to be water rich. I don't want to be water.
It's gonna take groundwater, reclamation, right? Learn all about that. Riparian zones, which I was totally against until I really learned about it. So that's proof that even I maybe can learn something. But I still think too, and the Blanco Conservation Initiative can help with the education of people, because I think it's easier to educate than mandate.
You just, Dave said this was the first of the meetings. I think this has been great. We're going to do, I would suggest next time, tell us a little bit more about what it's about besides just water. There's a lot of water issues out there, maybe it's about whatever.
So just one other side note. This is from the Texas Water Development Board. So this is a graph of population growth from 2020 to 2070. And they show Blanco County only growing about 10,000 people by 2070. Believe that?
By when, 2070?
2070?
Wait,
Like, basically, like 8,000 people.
Yeah, it's gonna be short of that. So scroll down.
You say that may affect our grant capability.
Well, no, so what I'm saying is that we need to pursue all the water sources we can get our hands on, because we know.
They think we're not.
Right, they think we're not going to grow, and this, if they're using this data for the grants we go after, well, no wonder we don't get any grants, because they don't think we're in a growth county. So scroll down, so this is by.
Till then, you take a drive out here.
This is usage, demands by usage. Again, not a huge increase in municipal use.
That's crazy.
absolutely crazy. Go down again, sir. The usage of manufacturing, all these guys, livestock. Projected, recommended projects serving interest areas. Direct reuse of Blanco 2030, $1 million in capital costs, not happening.
Is that sort of city limits, so it's not the whole area? I mean.
Right, they're talking about, yeah, so when they go like this, they're saying Blanco, the city, right? If they go Blanco, the county, then that's what they're talking about. So here's municipal conservation by Blanco, the city. $1.7 million. Their whole thought process is around, and it's the same thing for Johnson City. They're all about conserving water, not developing water and strategically moving water toward the county of Blanco. And this is part of our problem with Water Development Board. And the last time this was updated was 2017 or 18. I forget what it was. And so we need to get on the stick in terms of marching what's going on in Blanco. 281's expanding, and these guys don't even think that's gonna happen. Yeah, I don't know.
You can take text dots numbers. Yes, I think text dot numbers are gonna double or triple this.
Is that all of them? No, down. Still in that. Oh, yeah. So again, here's another one. Demand at 100% reduction. They're doing all of these drought management things. They're not looking for water. Aquifer storage and recovery, no money. Groundwater wells and other, no money. Other direct use, no money. Other strategies, no money. Do a drought management plan? Give me a break.
Who is they?
This is Texas Water Development Board.
Well, Paul Babb did a talk recently at Jim of the Hills, and aquifer recharge is also an option the way the hydrology is.
Well, but you have to have a
so
source
is-
of water to recharge with.
So is Wells, actually.
But you have to be able to have water to recharge it.
Not
So,
really,
you
you
were
can
saying
recharge the
secondary.
aquifer,
Right.
but
Yeah,
no, it was problematic because you can poison your aquifer if you try to manually recharge.
right. So the aquifer that feeds the Blanco corridor here, coming down through the river. That, spring is at Gillespie County and Kendall County. The water level in Gillespie County is 20 feet below the outlet of that spring. That's why the river doesn't flow. And Gillespie County talks about drill, baby, drill, because we need to expand and create AV. So this is the disconnect that Water Development Board has with Central Texas and the Hill.
You know that the population growth you showed there, what percentage per year is that?
Wow.
Because, I mean, Texas uses 1.8% per year, which is a
Well, you can slow
statewide.
down and I can give you a quick calculation.
It's statewide.
These are other stuff.
No, but a lot. Blanton County's growing at over 4% a year.
Yeah,
It
but
has been for several years.
yeah, but somebody needs to tell Texas Water
We
Development.
need to go see them. We lost out. That's in this regard. Remember just recently,
Yeah, so they're saying 10,000 over
I think
years,
our guys are Daniel Larson.
10,000 over 50 years.
A representative from Michael County is Daniel Larson.
I mean, if they're using the same generic number that Texas uses statewide, this is not the whole state, this is hill country.
these are agencies, self.
I understand. Part of the reason they're using some of those numbers they are is because Austin and San Antonio both are part of bigger organizations that cooperate, and little Blanco County is out here standing on trying to fight our own battles. And there's advantages and disadvantages to that.
I'll show you one more.
They're on.
We were fortunate to get this 3.8 million TIF from them to fix these big leakers, three biggest leaking. But I don't know if folks know that We won that one, but we lost out on a $21 million bid for wastewater to put in sewer throughout the city. That was in an application to Water Development Board. And part of it would drive to this, well, population, 21 million, we're not gonna drop that on you, you know. So we need to fight, we need to fight. We do right.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of putting together a group that will go and try and interface with these, Water Development Board districts that are created. I think, like I said, the last time that the Blanco one met was 2017, that's when they got all that other data. But you can go on the websites, check it all out. Jason is off the chart. Just food for thought.
Anybody else have anything to ask or contribute?
Oh, is that slideshow available on the city website or?
No, you can get it at, Texas Water Development Board.
I mean, the one y'all made.
We can have a hard copy.
The one that,
Yes.
We'll put it on the
So-
website tomorrow.
yeah, that's what I mean.
We'll put it up.
Because it, I mean, if you want
Yeah,
people
okay, if you want.
to have a say, that's probably the thing to see.
I'll go.
Someone.
Yeah. Also, are y'all getting gutters anytime soon, so we can use, can't use water collection tanks to water the flowers here at the park? Like on City Hall?
Good, yeah, we're tracking the bacteria.
I mean,
First step, I don't have letters or.
Okay, we'll figure it out. Good question. Yeah, it's a single pitch roof too, so it should be really easy to.
2,000
Excellent.
Thanks you all for
Thank you,
organizing
thank you,
this.
Glenn.
Thanks, for coming.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody. I'll take it posted to the second. Okay, good. We're working on it.